What's up, guys? This is TheKephas. In this video, I am going to showcase some new macros that I have created for World of Warcraft using a mod called GNOME Sequencer Enhanced. This mod allows you to create extremely powerful macros that can perform most, if not all, of your rotation with a single button. This can be extremely useful for individuals like myself who has a disability, or for people who just want to be lazy. So keep in mind that these macros are created primarily for those who are playing the game at a more casual level, but feel free to use them and alter them as you see fit. If you have further questions about the mod or my macros, I recommend checking out my FAQ video, and if you'd like to learn more about how to play the class in question, you might want to check out my crash course. It can help get you started, and I will provide links to all of these things in the description below. Today we are going to check out the macro that I've created for Vengeance Demon Hunters, and as a tanking class, this was a very difficult one to macro. If it was a DPS class, it would be very easy to macro because the abilities work really well in a macro, but unfortunately, the abilities are meant to be used situationally, at least a lot of them are. A lot of them can be used on cooldown, but there are some that have to be used situationally. So, with the way this macro is designed, it's designed as if you were playing the class as a DPS, meaning you're out in the world questing, you're out doing daily quests, world quests, whatever you're doing it by yourself, you're solo playing, and you want to play as a Vengeance Demon Hunter, this macro will work great for you. If you're trying to tank, I would recommend that you either opt to not use a macro or you alter this one a little bit to make sure that you're not using certain abilities just willy-nilly. So we'll get into that. Let's type /GS. I'll show you what I mean, and I'll show you what the macro does. The one that you will be importing is this one here, Kef Vengeance. So we right-click it, we can peek under the hood, and you can see the first thing under pre-macro. As with all my macros, this is where the Heart Essence ability would go. It says Heart Essence, but it will use whatever your Heart of Azeroth essence is. In my case, it will use Concentrated Flame. If you're using a different essence, the macro will use it accordingly. Whatever your 8.2 Heart of Azeroth essence you choose, the macro will use it on cooldown. So it works out really well. Now we move into the main sequence. If you choose Fellblade or Fell Devastation as talents, the macro will use them on cooldown. Follows that up with Fiery Brand, and this is where we need to talk, because Fiery Brand is a DPS increase if you're just trying to deal damage, but as a tank, it's also a defensive cooldown, which means that you don't want to be using it just whenever. You want to use it strategically. You want to use your intuition and your discretion to use it as needed. So you can either add a modifier to it, like cast mod control, Fiery Brand, and then when you hold down control, the macro will use Fiery Brand, or you can just remove it from the macro and use it on a separate button. This is if you're trying to tank. If you're just trying to DPS, which is what this macro is designed for, then you just use it on cooldown. It's fine. It's whatever. So keep that in mind. It's entirely up to you how you go about it. Now we follow that up with an actual modifier. If you choose Spirit Bomb as a talent, it will consume pain and it will consume soul fragments. And so if you hold down shift, the macro will use Spirit Bomb. And then if you don't hold down shift, the macro will use Soul Cleave, which pretty much does the same thing to a lesser degree. Spirit Bomb as a talent, it's a much more powerful talent. It does a lot more than Soul Cleave, but you have to hold down shift. Now the thing is, again though, with Soul Cleave, it kind of works like Death Strike for Death Knights. It heals you whenever you use it. It consumes soul fragments. It consumes pain. I have it set up here just to be used whenever you have enough pain to use it, when it gets to this line in the sequence. But you really want to try to use Soul Cleave when you need healing. So you want to build up your pain, build up your fragments, and then use it to keep yourself from overcapping any of your resources, but also you want to use it whenever you really need some healing. So you don't necessarily want to just starve yourself of all your resources and use Soul Cleave when you are tanking. So again, you can either add a modifier to it, or you can remove the line from the macro entirely and use that ability on a separate button. It's entirely up to you, but as a DPS increase, it works out just fine. Now we move into Infernal Strike, and this is one of those target location abilities. It does deal damage, it does some AoE damage, and I have it set up here to be used on cooldown at your feet. At player means at your feet. Now, this is also a sort of a mobile ability, so again, like with the other abilities, you might opt to not include it in the macro. You are free to remove it from the macro and use it on a separate button if you want to use it more as a mobile ability. So keep that in mind, but as a raw DPS increase, it's just going to use it on cooldown, and you're going to slam down right at your feet, and it's going to do some damage. So again, it's entirely up to you. However you want to do this is fine. You are free to edit this as you see fit. And then it's going to use Immolation Aura on cooldown. It's going to put Sigil of Flame at your feet in case you don't choose the talent that will always put sigils at your feet. I have it set up so that it will always do that. And then it will use Shear on cooldown, and then as filler it will use Throw Glaive. And then of course, because we're just throwing all these things in here, the macro will use Demon Spikes on cooldown. Again, if that's something that you want to manage separately, manage more strategically, you can remove it from the macro or you can add a modifier. I'm just trying to design this so that it can be a good DPS macro, a good easy macro to use. As you can see, it does do everything. It's just that if you're trying to serve the tank role, you're not meant to be doing everything as soon as you can. So that's where the complexity comes in, but that's where you come in to adjust it as you see fit. I've made a basic macro for you to use, to play around with, to DPS with, if you're doing solo stuff as a Vengeance Demon Hunter. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of talents. I've included pretty much everything in here, but there are a couple of things to go over. A lot of these are passives, which is really nice for macro users like myself because it doesn't really change up how the macro works. As you saw, we do have Fellblade included, and then of course Fracture is a replacement of Shear, and it's of course still got a cooldown, and it will generate pain. It does have 2 charges. The macro will use Fracture just as it would use Shear. It will use it on cooldown, and it will generate you some pain and also some soul shards. So that's really nice. The macro will use it no problem. You won't have to change anything. Of course, you also know how Spirit Bomb works. You hold down Shift and then Fell Devastation. The macro will use this ability on cooldown. Keep in mind, this is a channeling ability, so once you start channeling, you might want to stop spamming the macro because you do risk interrupting the channeling by using a different ability with the macro. So be careful when you're channeling an ability when you're using one of those macros. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, the last one that I did want to go over, this one here, Soul Barrier. I thought about including it because it is only a 30-second cooldown, and the shield lasts for 12 seconds, so there's only a very short amount of time. It doesn't consume any resources either. I could add this to the macro, but the thing is, it also consumes soul fragments to increase the barrier. So I don't know. I feel like maybe it's best to be used separately, but again, you're also using soul shards on your other abilities. So it's up to you. It's more of a defensive ability. So I don't know. I just felt like when it comes to tanking defensive abilities, I tend to keep those out, but it's entirely up to you what you want to do. And that's basically everything you need to know about these macros and how they work. Remember, these macros work best when they are spammed. So either press the button as fast as you can or use a rapid fire button, which is fair game as long as you're the one pressing the button. As powerful as these macros are, they are far from perfect. So if you want to play the game at a high level and get the most out of your class, I highly recommend that you play the game without these macros. But if you'd like to get started with Gnome Sequencer Enhanced, you can do so by downloading and installing the mod. A link can be found in the description below. Along with it, you will find paste bin links for any macros featured in this video. If you'd like to use them, simply click the link and you'll be taken to a raw paste bin of the macro. Select the entire macro, copy, log into the appropriate class, type /GS to open the Gnome Sequencer screen, click on Import, paste the macro into the available space, make sure that Automatically Create Macro Icon is checked, and click Import. You can now drag the icon to your action bar and the macro is ready to be used. If you followed all the steps correctly, the macro should be working fine. If something isn't working, start over and make sure that you follow all the steps correctly. If you are having further issues, I recommend that you check out the mod page or contact the mod's author for more information. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter And if you'd like, you can support this channel on Patreon. Links to all of this can be found in the description below. This is TheKephas. Until next time.